Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurun militam yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jata Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. He comes and he's gone. But he's always there when you need him. And he's got the best sound system. This is the best sounding mic I've ever used in my life. Welcome everyone on this rainy morning. I appreciate your coming out on a morning like this when the mind is telling us just stay inside, where it's nice and cozy. You all came, so that means a lot to me. How many of you were not here yesterday? Please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, about half, or maybe even more than half. So I was going to continue what we were speaking about yesterday, but let me just do a little bit of review. Otherwise, we're really going to be. I think you may have a hard time connecting. We've been covering what I would call conventional Vedanta. It has to do with understanding the nature of the self. It has to do with why we may not be experiencing the nature of the self. If the nature of the self is eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss, but we're not always feeling that, why would that be? And the answer is the mind. The mind is in the way. Somehow there's programming within our minds that are preventing us from experiencing our own true nature, but that there are paths of yoga which can enable one to overcome this obstacle of the mind for the purpose of the self experiencing their own true nature again. And so far we've discussed quite a bit about the nature of the self, and we discussed quite a bit about the mind. And then we want to discuss, before we talk about the paths of yoga, we want to talk a little bit about the environment that we're moving around in as well, because that certainly affects the mind. And we could call our circumstance like the predicament of the soul. We are a spark of pure spiritual energy that again is eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss by nature. But we're trapped within a body made out of a different kind of energy, according to the great sages. We are, according to the ancient texts of the Vedic literature, that we're made of spirit, but we're trapped within a body made of matter, moving around through a world made of matter. And we're engaging with this world through the mind, which is connected to the senses. The senses are bringing in information. The mind is taking in that information, processing it, storing it. It's stored in the subconscious mind. We have all these impressions, all these samskars. They rise up at different times, and they affect our emotions. They affect our thoughts. And the yogi is very concerned about how not to be a victim of that mind, but how to get control of it so that they can become free. So with that background, we started going to more of the predicament that we're moving around through an environment, a world. We can call it the material world if we like. And we brought up an interesting idea, maybe a bit of a crazy idea, something that may sound a little wild, a little science fiction, but the yogis say it's true. And that is that they say that this world is like a reflection. Or you could say it is a reflection. We're going to engage some other metaphors too. Sometimes it's said that this world is like a dream. It's a dreamlike existence. It's like a reflection. Today we're also going to go into, we found the computer analogies to be useful. So I think today we'll also dig deeper into the idea of seeing this world like a virtual reality that we may be moving through. But I began yesterday with a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, or some verses from the beginning of the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which describe that this world is like a banyan tree. And this is my art. It will be available for auction at the end of this course. It says that this world is like a banyan tree that has its roots going up and its branches going down. What does that mean? Where do we see a tree that has its roots going up and its branches going down? And the idea is that it's describing a reflection. If you're on one side of a pond and you're looking at a tree on the other side of the pond, then if you're looking at the reflection in the water, then it appears that the tree is upside down. And so this is the Bhagavad Gita's way of expressing that. It's using the banyan tree as an analogous to the world that we're living in. It's saying that it's got many, many branches, and on those branches there are leaves and twigs, and those are the objects of the senses that we're trying to enjoy. It's like have you ever seen how many of you have seen a massive banyan tree before? It's quite a sight to take in, isn't it? I mean, just when you see a huge one. I mentioned this yesterday, but they say that the largest tree in the world, it's on, I don't know if it's in Calcutta or on the outskirts of Calcutta, and it's 3.5 acres large. This tree, it just expands and expands and expands and expands. Because it has, from the branches, trunks grow down. And so it could just keep getting bigger, and it could get more complicated, more entangling. You get lost in that tree. And so this world is, in a sense, we're lost in it. We're moving around. We're trying to taste the fruits of it. But a lot of those fruits are bitter, and we suffer quite a bit. So then a few things were mentioned. Maybe I'll just mention the points that were made about this reflection of a banyan tree. That is the world that we're moving around in. You ready? Everybody with me? Give me some vocal response here. Thank you very much. So it said that the branches of this tree, the twigs of this, the roots going down, yes. It said that the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world, nor can one understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is, right? To this day, with our Hubble telescopes and microscopes and, sonar equipment that they send off into space and try to hear echoes coming back and so on, we can't determine where this universe ends, right? We can't really measure it. They might throw out ideas and so on, but nobody can really size it up. So we can't, it also says that the real form of this tree can't be perceived in this world. The real form can't be perceived. What does that mean? And we'll talk a bit about that now, but if this world is a reflection, then something must be reflected, right? A reflection isn't the real object. There's an object that's being reflected in the reflection, but we can't see it. It's saying that this world is a reflection of another world, and we can't see that world. Okay, interesting. It goes on to say, but with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of, who remembers? Thank you, detachment. That is a big clue to why we are trapped wandering around this tree tasting a lot of bitter fruits often. If detachment is the way out, then what is keeping us in? And I guess you could say attachment, right? Or you could say desire. We have desires that keep us here. And then it also went on to say that once having cut down the tree with the weapon of detachment, one must seek that place, having gone, one never returns. And there surrender unto that, and uses the term Adi Purusha, to the original person. The original person from whom everything began, and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. And I mentioned yesterday that this phrasing speaks to the ancient Vedic texts that preceded the Bhagavad Gita, texts that speak about how there is a Purusha that all the devas are worshiping, that's whose awareness is everywhere. The Vedanta Sutra speaks of that absolute truth as being that from which everything has come from. Janmadyasya yataha. So it's speaking to that and saying that there's a person behind it, and an original person, the person from which everything originates. That's a big statement. As we go deeper into this course, we're going to dig deeper into that, what that means. There are different ways that the absolute truth is portrayed in these ancient texts, sometimes as an energy. Sometimes we say God is everywhere. Right? Sometimes as a localized feature of Vishnu, that within the heart of every living being, there's this presence of God, this inner God, Chaitra Guru, sometimes we say. So sometimes we say God is everywhere. Sometimes we say God is inside me, God is within me. But there's also the conception of Bhagavan, God is a person. And that's what this text is referring to. So that's some classes down the road. We'll get into all of that. But right now, we're concerned with this idea of us living in a reflection or virtual reality. And we started speaking about reflections yesterday, but I wanted to read you one other thing that speaks to what we were just talking about. This is the commentary to the first text that describes this upside-down tree. And this is a commentary by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I'm not going to read the whole commentary. He gives quite a bit on these verses. But there was one part that I'd like to read to you. He says, now, there's no ready experience in this world of a tree situated with its branches down and its roots upward. But there is such a thing. That tree can be found beside a reservoir of water. We can see that the trees on the bank reflect upon the water with their branches down and their roots up. In other words, the tree of this material world is only a reflection of the real tree of the spiritual world. And now here's this really interesting, it's kind of deep. I find this next statement kind of deep and something worthy of our discussion and contemplation. He says, this reflection of the spiritual world is situated on, right? The reflection of the tree is situated on what? The water. But the reflection of this world that we're moving through, they're saying it's a reflection of another source or another world, and saying this reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire, just as the tree's reflection is situated on water. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material light. One who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then they can cut off their relationship with it. Okay. That's a big statement. That's a very interesting statement. In other words, it's saying, just like if you have a tree and there's a pond in front of it, but say that pond had no water in it, there would be no reflection. There would only be the real tree. There would be no reflection of a tree. And so this is saying that there is a spiritual realm that doesn't operate with the same laws that operate in the realm that we're in. And we're going to get into that, maybe start to get into that today. What are the laws that govern the reflected world that we're in? But if there was a tree with the pond, but the pond had no water, there'd be no reflection. And if there is a spiritual realm that's being reflected, but there was no desire, or let's say no material desire, then there would be no need for this world. There would be no surface upon which this reflected world would exist. In other words, this world exists because of our desire, right? And that desire has to be some desire that's separate from the type of desire that exists within spirituality. We could call it material desire, right? Something to think about. I don't want to go too deep into this right now, because these are the kind of questions that we're going to ponder in part 2 of this course. I'm calling the part 1 conventional Vedanta, and that part I'll call confidential Vedanta. Confidential because it gets into a lot of what the Bhagavad Gita calls the great secrets of the sacred texts. Yes, Vikramji?
Desire is a reflection on which the trees reflected.
Yeah.
Desire is in water, so to say.
Yes. Yeah.
There's no desire.
Yes. Yeah. And you know, any yoga practice, if a book comes forward or a teacher comes forward with a practice of yoga or a style of yoga, a type of yoga, it's going to be important to identify how it deals with desire, right? What is their strategy for how to deal with our, let's say, material desires? Some paths, they want to analyze that desire. Let's analyze that desire in detail in a very stoic way, in a very non-sentimental way. Examine it, break it down, dismantle it, crack it, free ourselves of it. You know, other paths of yoga may engage desire. They may try to purify desire, redirect desire. There are different ways that a path of yoga can deal with desire, but it must deal with desire. It must deal with, if it's going to be effective. If we're going to get control of our mind, we must deal with our desires. We must have a strategy of how we're going to do it. And so there are different paths, and some of them may be more suitable for us than others. So that will be consideration that we come to very soon when we begin to talk about the 4 paths of yoga. Any other questions before I move on? Yes, I'm forgetting your name? Michael.
I unfortunately have to leave tomorrow morning.
Okay.
But I would be really interested in hearing part 2. Is it available?
Well, we can make it available. I was just thinking, we're meeting so many great people here. There's hundreds of people coming here every day, every evening. And I was thinking we need to find a way to stay connected if people want to continue. I have a podcast, and that's one way to stay connected. And that podcast, it's more than a podcast. It's more like a community, thousands of people. And amongst those, hundreds of them are engaged in we call them sage groups, where people get together and discuss. It's a place to discuss more and make friends and so on. It works really nice for a lot of people, but I think we need even more direct ways to stay connected, where, like, for instance, someone could get the recordings of courses that are going on and so on. So maybe you say you leave tomorrow, and will you be here tomorrow morning, or will this be your last class? Okay. So then let's connect afterward, and maybe we can send those recordings to you. Yes? Okay. I'm sorry? Oh, you're also leaving, Nicole. Okay. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. Yeah. Let's get together after this class, and we'll try to figure this out. Thank you. Okay. So let's continue now. We're talking about reflections. We're saying that this world is reflection. We began to discuss some things about reflections. We didn't quite finish this yesterday, if I remember correctly. So that is the following. 1, reflections are both real and unreal. Okay, I'm going to go through this maybe just a little quick because we discussed it yesterday, but please raise your hand, especially if you weren't here yesterday. Even if you were here yesterday, it doesn't matter. Raise your hand if need be. Reflections are real and unreal. They're certainly real, right? If you have a mirror, it's real glass, and there's real light that's reflected on the real surface. So a reflection is in a sense, real. But what is unreal about it is that when we look at it and if we identify it as being the object that's being reflected, then we're an illusion. And in that sense, we could say mirrors are illusory, right? They tend to confuse us, or they have the ability to confuse. I gave the example yesterday of like I've seen a silly YouTube clip where they put like a mirror out in the forest, and then like you see how animals react to it. You know, you could see a bear, and the bear looks in the mirror and sees itself. Actually, does it see itself? No, it doesn't see it. It sees a reflection of itself, and it thinks it's another bear, and it freaks out and starts attacking the mirror. And then the mirror falls, and then it's really confused, like, where did the bear go? So the mirror exists, but in another sense, the reflection is an illusion, right? It appears to be something that it's not. And so in the same way, it's saying that this world is real and unreal, right? I gave another example. I said that if a child wants to drive a car, they have a desire, right? Let's go back to understanding that this world exists on desire. A little boy sees his father driving a car, and a desire springs up in the mind of the child. I want to drive a car, just like daddy's driving a car. I want to drive a car. It may even be a really strong desire, right? But reality cannot facilitate that desire, right? The child is incapable of driving a car. So if reality will not facilitate the desire, how will the desire be met? Someone tell me? Through illusion, right? It's only through illusion that desire of the child driving the car can be met. The child's going to need an illusion, or you could say a reflection of a car. And that reflection of a car might be a toy car. It might even be a cardboard box, right? But let's say it's like, sometimes I've seen these little kids and like they're in some kind of fancy battery-driven kind of car. They got a little thing in this car. And that toy car is a reflection of a real car. You understand? The toy car, and this gets to point number 2, a reflection always indicates the existence of the more real object that is being reflected. You can't have a toy car without there first being a real car, right? A real car exists first, then the desire that can't be met in reality, a child wants to drive it, has to be met through illusion. Because of the desire, the reflection is created. Does it make sense? Everybody with me? Yes, Andrea.
Like you're saying, this world is sustained by desire?
In a sense, yes.
But maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that's the purpose of this world. Right? In like Orthodox sense, there's another purpose.
These sages will say there are 2 purposes. One is to fulfill the desire, and 2 is to rehabilitate ourselves from the desire.
But there's a purpose to us experiencing this.
I'm from my studies, what I found, and from the teachers that I follow, as is taught in the lineage that I practice, is that there are these 2 purposes. That one, it is an opportunity to try to experience an illusory realm, as if it's real. Yeah, and you could call the growing part. You see, it's kind of like saying a prison. Is prison a place to grow? Well, in one sense, it is.
There's
Right.
a point of why the spirit chooses to be incarnated.
Yes.
And of course, desires is perpetuating the wheel of karma, and etc., etc.
Yes.
But there was an intention to experience it for a reason. At least that's how I understand.
Yeah, and within that reason, you could say we have the gift of free will, and so we make choices, but this choice would be recognized as an unfortunate one. That for whatever reason, I chose illusion over reality. But it's a very deep question, yeah, and it's a question that even within my own lineage is debated hotly.
What I'm following there, like more like it's a school, it went wrong, but still there was a purpose.
Okay, so let's say like that. But so in a simple sense, let's say that this world gives us the opportunity to fulfill a desire that can't be fulfilled in reality. Okay, but it's also, and we're going to get to the next part very soon, how it also, you could say, helps us grow, or you could say how it helps us rectify that desire. But for now, let's just stick with this point, that because, Nicole, prison, yes. For sure. That's the whole point, is it's meant to be reformatory, right? It's meant to reform. And so again, this world plays that reformatory role, right? Okay. Yes.
So would a mortality then be a reflection of the energy of the deity based as like a reflection based on the desire wanting to connect with that deity?
It's a very subtle question that you're asking, because on a physical level, yes. On a physical level, we hear a description of a particular god or goddess, and then based on that origin, a form is created in its image, reflecting the description that's been heard. But in one's meditation, and the yogi would argue in reality, that energy is non-different. It is that god or goddess. So that's it, yes and no, I think we could say. That's an interesting question. Thank you. Yes, I forgot your name. Please remind me of your name. Oh, that's Gita. Gita, that's right. Okay. Okay.
There is a thought in New Age philosophy that we are mirroring the world. That kind of the world is a reflection of our inside thoughts, inside desires, inside like that. I think all the idea that we can manifest something in the world is based on that. So I am wondering, what about Vaishnava philosophy, and is it the same or different? Is this the thought that the world is a reflection of our inside world is there or not?
I've never heard it expressed like I've heard it expressed in New Age circles, quite like that. But I don't think that means that there's not a similarity in certain ideas. And when we get to begin to speak about, in one sense, just by saying that it's existing on our desire means our desire was involved in the creation of what we're experiencing in this world.
Because sometimes I can see the similarities, like even if I am angry, I can meet angry people on the street. It's like some experience, even some noise or noise or something. It's like, what is happening?
Yeah. And so then we start to begin to talk about karma and how the world responds to our actions and so on. And of course, our actions are connected to our thoughts or desires. So there's a chain. So that's there. What I haven't heard so much in like traditional Vedanta is more like the idea of you can manifest whatever you want by your. Certainly, we hear about mystics that have ability to manipulate material energy at on incredible levels. We can all do it on some level, like physically even, and that a mystic might be able to create with their mind. But what I don't hear, what I'm not familiar with hearing is kind of like the kind of jargon where it's saying like very directly your thoughts are creating, you can manifest things. If I want to, you hear things like if you want a parking spot, then just, you meditate on that spot and then it opens up and things like that. That kind of stuff I don't hear so much. And even saying that, I'm not saying that it has no validity, but it's just something I'm not so familiar with. Thank you. Okay, so we've said about reflections that they're both real and unreal. Really important point, because we hear a lot of Eastern philosophy that talks about this world being unreal. How does the Bhagavad Gita describe it? It describes it as not in a mystical way, in a practical way. In a practical way, the Bhagavad Gita is saying it's real and it's unreal like a mirror is real and unreal. like a reflection is real and unreal, right? The mirror is real, the mirror exists, the light on the mirror exists, that's all real, it definitely exists. But when we misidentify what's going on in that reflection, we are in illusion. That's the case. Okay. Furthermore, reflections appear like the original, but they're the exact opposite. Right? A reflection appears like the original. If I look in a mirror, I see myself. It looks exactly like me, except it's exactly the opposite, right? What's left is right and what's right is left. Or in the case of a reflection, like on a pond, if the tree is on the other side, then it's upside down. Exactly the same, but exactly backwards. And if let's hold on to that for a moment. And then finally, reflections are temporary, but the source remains unchanged. Let's say you have a window to a shop on a sidewalk, on a city sidewalk. That window is providing reflection, constant reflection. Let's say I walk past it. Let's say I look at myself in it. Have any of you ever done this before? Looked at yourself as you walk past the store window? I think you can just watch everybody kind of like looks at themselves, but they're going, how do I look today? And so, so I might step in front of the mirror. Step in front of that window. And as soon as I step in front of it, a reflection of me is produced on the surface of the window. I may stop for a moment and take a look at myself there. Take a look, not at myself, but at this reflection. And then I move on, right? The reflection came and gone. It came and it went. But I continue unchanged, in a sense. So in a sense, reflections are like that, right? That the substance remains, whereas the form is or the reflection is temporary or in a state of constant flux. Now, if all of these are true about reflections, and if this world is a reflection, then this gives us something to consider. That this world is both real and unreal. That this world indicates the existence of another world, another more permanent world, well, which relates to the last point. That this world appears like the original world, but is the exact opposite. And finally, that this world is temporary, whereas the substance that's being reflected is eternal. Right? This world is in a constant state of change, constantly moving, shifting. Whereas in the reflected realm, the spiritual realm, time, they say the force of time, which we're going to talk about very soon, is conspicuous by its absence. That there's not this destructive feature that changes and ultimately destroys everything. That's a feature that's operating within the reflection only and not within the origin. Okay? So that's something to chew on. Bhagavad Gita is telling us, and other important texts like this are telling us, that there's another realm, and this world is merely a reflection of it, and we're moving around through it. And we can get into questions of why we're moving around through it, but right now it's trying to instruct us how to get out. It's saying that our desires, certain desires, material desires, desires for illusion, desires that can only be fulfilled through illusion, are the reason why we're existing within the illusion. And the way out, who remembers? Detachment. Cut your way out with the weapon of detachment. When you're free of the material desires, you're free of the material world. Interesting? Okay. Questions? Thoughts? Anyone like to share? Yes?
You said something about fully understanding the banyan tree before detaching.
Yes. Yeah, let me read you a little something more from the commentary. The tree, being the reflection of the real tree, is an exact replica. Everything there is in the spiritual world, right? Everything here in this world exists in spirituality. In other words, form, relationships, variety exist in spirit and is reflected in this world. Where's the part that I want? The impersonalists, this gets a little complicated. I don't want to get into too much. Okay. It's saying that this material world is a warped reflection of the spiritual realm. And so therefore the spiritual realm must have the same variegatedness, but in reality. The Prakriti is the external energy of the Lord. Prakriti meaning the energy that this world is made of, and the material energy. The material energy is the external energy of the Supreme Lord, and the Purusha is the Supreme Lord himself. And that is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Since this manifestation is material, this world, it is temporary. A reflection is temporary, for it sometimes is seen and is sometimes not seen. But the origin from whence the reflection is reflected is eternal. The material reflection of the real tree has to be cut off. When it is said that a person knows the Vedas, and this speaks to your question, I believe. When it is said that a person knows the Vedas, it is assumed that they know how to cut off the attachment to this material world. If one knows that process, then they actually know the Vedas. One who is attracted, does that speak? Your question again was?
Just trying to understand
What?
Yeah, that process of fully understanding the tree before fully detaching. Or whether it's you go along, you detach as much as you can along the way. That process.
Okay, it's an important question. It's saying that we can know it, and it's saying that even this was in the verse itself. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. No, well, here I think he's specifically speaking about this tree. In other words, when we know the nature of this world, we know the message of the Vedas. He says, one who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas. Okay, this is a question that we'll get to later. When we say the Vedas, especially when we speak about the four Vedas, the four Vedas in one sense tell us how to enjoy this illusion. They tell us how through ritual and living good, one can cultivate good karma and enjoy this world. That's not what it means by the knower of the Vedas, because there's more to the Vedas, like the Upanishads that speak about detachment. So he says, one who is attracted to the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. He does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas, as disclosed here, is to cut down this reflected tree and attain the real tree of the spiritual world. So, yeah, there are truths here. Everything that I'm saying to you right now, in your mind, you may be saying, this is interesting. This kind of makes some sense. There seems to be a clear logic here. But still, we haven't, our conviction in it may not be solid. So then what one does is, the ideas, and Upanishads speak about this, it begins with hearing. You hear the message. It goes into the ear, and then you contemplate it. And then you have to reflect on it. So first it's called Shravana, you hear, and then Manana, you reflect on it. And by reflecting on the knowledge, particularly in relation to our experiences in this world, that knowledge can mature from what's called jnana, or knowledge, to vijnana, or realized knowledge, or we could call that wisdom. So this is part of the path of practically any yogi, is reflecting on the knowledge that we hear in such a way that it becomes more deeply imbibed, and we begin to not only, it doesn't just exist separately in our mind as some knowledge, but it becomes the knowledge through which we see the world spontaneously. And they call that jnana chakshusa, seeing through the eyes of knowledge. So it's cultivated. It's cultivated through hearing, through discussion, through questioning, through reflecting, through hearing again, reflecting again. And like this, it can mature, become firmly rooted in our awareness. Yes, Sanjeev.
Unqualified question, but just a curious perspective. So, are there multiple reflections? So, does everyone have a window or a lake, or is there just one lake, one window, and we're all looking at it from different angles?
It's very broad and vast, but in one sense it's one. But certainly we look at it from different angles, right? Again, as as I mentioned yesterday, as this course goes on, I'm going to ask you to expand your imagination to accept the possibility of things that sound increasingly wild. Right? But if you read the descriptions of the Puranas, and these are basically just expanding from what's taught in the original four Vedas, the world that we exist in is one universe that we can't measure. Again, as I was saying earlier, we can't measure its size. And that universe is just one amongst practically uncountable universes that are all manifesting in one breath of Lord Vishnu. So our own tininess is almost impossible for us to really conceive of. And we all have we've all found ourselves in some little corner of this vast, incredibly enormous material creation. And we all have our own perspective on it. So even you and I are sitting right across from each other. Somehow you and I have become very close. If you consider it from the zoomed out perspective, somehow our paths, like two ships crossing in the night, you and I are sitting right across from each other right now. But even still, we're seeing it. I'm seeing this world right one way right now, and you're seeing it another way right now too. Yes.
So, in my comprehension of what we said and explored in a sense of reflection, in my understanding, I feel that there's a sense of
Duality.
yes, and separateness when two things have to become one. Like, for example, thought and feeling has to melt into the sense of like the essence of your being. Because without thought, you can feel and become less clarity, which invade confusion when you have, like in my experience, I recently realized there is no separation. Everything is one. Up is down, in is out. So if I'm going to put things apart, how do I keep a balance between that wholeness or oneness or completeness?
You're asking my thoughts on your thoughts? Or I don't know, was there a question there, or were you just sharing with us your thoughts?
That's
The question is,
how does one come to that where things become real and not reflected?
you see, there are different schools of Vedanta, right? Different, what is called sampradayas, different lineages that have different interpretations of the text there. And some of the texts emphasize a oneness, and some of the texts emphasize a difference. The lineage that I practice in is called Achintya Bhed Abheda Tattva. Achintya, which means like inconceivable, but inconceivable not in the sense that it's entirely mystical, but inconceivable that the realization of this truth is not achieved through one's own mental endeavor, but that it can only be understood fully and as it is by being handed down. So inconceivable in that sense. Inconceivable bhed abhed, inconceivable oneness and difference. That that in one sense everything is one, but in another sense within that oneness there's distinction, and even eternal distinction. For instance, Bhagavad Gita will say, what is it? 15:7. Thank you. Mamai vangsho jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana. Mamai vangsa, angsa means like a part. Mamai vangsho, my parts. Krishna is saying, Mamai vangsho jiva loke, that every living being, every jiva is one of my parts. Jiva bhuta sanatana, and that they are that way sanatana, they're that way eternally. So some lineages of Vedanta, and they'll say that in the end there's only oneness. And other schools will argue, no. There in one sense there's a oneness, and we need to understand that oneness. In another sense there's a distinction, and we need to understand that distinction too. In other words, they'll say that our individuality, my being me and you being you, is something that's eternal, something that always exists. So this type of yogi, they're concerned with understanding the oneness. In other words, they're seeing God everywhere, and they're seeing everything in God. So certainly that speaks to oneness. But at the same time, they're understanding that we're one and different. A husband and a wife, are they one? In one sense, they're one. And in another sense, they maintain their individuality. Or even like sometimes you're in your car and you're driving, like let's say you're driving up a ramp to enter another highway, and it'll say like, it'll have like the term like now traffic is merging. So in one sense, all the traffic is moving in one direction and it is one. But in another sense, every car still maintains its individuality. And so I'm not sure if I'm speaking to your question, but am I? Okay, good. So how, like for instance, in my own lineage and in my own practice, how do I try to understand oneness? I mean, in many ways, I mean, in one sense, that could be a very long conversation, but let's just say to get it started. I understand, the Vedas are going to say, Sarva Kal Vidam Brahma, everything is Brahman. And that means that everything is an energy coming from one source. Krishna will say in Bhagavad Gita, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo, Mata Sarvam Pavartite, Iti Matva Bhajanti Mam Buddha Bhava Samanvita. Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo, I am the source from which everything is emanating. And that the wise that know this, they worship me with all their hearts, with bhava. With bhava, they worship me. So there's a feeling of oneness, that I am made of God's energy. Like the sunlight is one with the sun. It has the same characteristics of the sun, right? What are the characteristics of the sun? Two in particular. Yeah. Well, two things we're experiencing very little of today. So the qualities of the sun are light and heat. And what are the qualities of the sunlight? Exactly the same, right? Light and heat. But one is dependent on the other. One is a source and one is an emanation of the source. So they're one in quality, but they're different in quantity, or they're different in relationship. There's a relationship that's not the same. One is definitely dependent on the other. This is also found in the Upanishads. Nityo nityanam, chaitanas chaitananam, eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman. We described, and maybe it was in our first talk here, those that were here, that the distinction between matter and spirit, and the qualities that spirit has that matter doesn't have. And those are its eternality and its consciousness, right? Matter, its forms are temporary, and it is insentient. It doesn't feel. Whereas spirit is eternal. You can't cut it. You can't break it. You can't kill it. And it's conscious. It's aware. It feels. So this verse speaks to those two things. Nityo nityanam. Amongst the nitya, amongst the eternal beings, nityo nityanam, chaitanas chaitananam, amongst the conscious beings, right? Nityo nityanam, amongst the many eternal beings, there is one eternal being. Nityo nityanam. Chaitanas Chaitananam. Amongst the many conscious beings, there's one conscious being. Eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman. The many are dependent on the one. Just as the sunlight is dependent on the sun. The sun's not dependent on the sunlight. The sunlight is dependent on the sun. So in this way, there's oneness and there's difference. The sunlight is one with the sun, but it's also different from the sun. And so this way, the yogi is trying to understand and fully realize both the oneness and the difference. Thank you. Andrea. Oh,
There's some Advaita Vedanta school which combines, so they say, you start with niti niti, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that, and then
yes.
at one point you start with iti, I'm that, and I'm that, and I'm that.
Okay. There's different practices of contemplation.
Approaches.
Yeah. Thank you. And Shashi.
I wanted to ask you about the point number 3, that there are
appears like the original,
yes,
but is exact opposite. Yeah.
So I understand the logic behind when you talk with the banyan tree, but when I try to apply the same logic on the scale of our dimension or universe, then what it would be if you talk about opposites?
Yes, that's a great question. So let's go deeper into this. We have about 2 minutes. So we can start here tomorrow too, but maybe we can get started now. You'll be here tomorrow? Okay, so maybe you can remind me. Maybe that's better. Why don't we do that? Why don't you bring that question up and we'll start with that tomorrow? Because it's too good a question to give such a short amount of time to. Any other quick thoughts before we check out? Yes.
I have a question, maybe it's
okay.
You said that the world, materialized world we see now in
yes.
is a reflection.
Yes.
So even is everything that we knowledge, the wisdom, everything is a reflection of truth. So for example, also the Bhagavad itself is a reflection.
The yogis from this tradition would say that the Bhagavad Gita is something different. The Bhagavad Gita is eternal, right? So it's you could say other knowledge may be a reflection of it, but it is the source. It is the spiritual energy. We're saying that the world is spirit. The world is a reflection of spirit, and the medium is matter, right? It's a reflection in matter, just like an object has a reflection by the medium. Like, here's my form, right? It's an object. If you see a reflection of this form on the surface of a mirror, in one sense, it has nothing to do with this object. It's a completely separate object. It's an object made out of different ingredients. It's made out of glass and light, right? But it appears to be this object. So one's the reflection and one's the reflected. So the distinction between what's reflected and the reflection is that they're saying spirit is the object that's being reflected, and matter is the glass and the light that is the form of the reflection. That's based on the object. Bhagavad Gita they would say that this is not. It's not a material vibration. And the evidence of that would be that it's eternality, that this message is eternal. It always has existed, it always will exist. Again, the yogis say that the sages say that this is apaurushaya. It's not created by some man at some point in time, but it's knowledge that has always existed. And then other knowledge might be a reflection of this. Thank you. I should stop now. It's been a joy. I'm really so grateful that all of you came out on such a rainy day. It really says a lot. I really appreciate your being here and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And I wanted to mention that even on this rainy day, if any of you would like to go deeper into conversations on this, then Adikarta Prabhu, who you see sitting in the back, he spends a lot of time sitting in the garden right here, and he's very approachable and very kind and very knowledgeable, and you can speak to him anytime you like. Adikarta Prabhu in the back.
We have a meeting in here between 1 and 2:30. Anytime you come, anytime.